Do we have him on the line? Okay,
right.
So we actually have our guest on the line, which is really why you guys tune in, let's be honest.
Of course.
He's a representative, of course, here in the United States. He's made a lot of us proud recently.
Yes.
His new book is called Fortitude. It's on the New York Times bestseller list, number 5, I believe, yesterday. Let's get it to number 1. You know him, you love him. He's a friend of the show. Mr. Dan Crenshaw, how are you, sir?
Hey, Stephen, good to be with you, man. I'm doing well. How are you?
Crappy. So, I do want to play a clip for anyone who was... I'm just really mad because I injected Lysol this morning and it didn't work out. So, I was following the very specific name brand prescription that I was told President Trump espoused.
Yeah.
And just so you know, it's not a cure.
I mean, you don't know that. You're not a scientist.
This is true.
That's true.
For people who haven't seen it, Mr. Crenshaw, I do want to play a clip because we've had you on the show quite a bit, but oh my gosh, I think I'm not a fan of Bill Maher. Maybe you two have a friendly relationship, but I don't know any. I can't. If you don't have anything nice to say, roll the clip.
There are still people coming in from China. He only stopped foreign nationals.
Yeah, okay, let me address that because I know that's what people are saying right now. But the reality is, it was about 40,000 people came in after that. These are U.S. citizens and green card holders and passport holders being repatriated. U.S. citizens. So you have to make the argument then that we shouldn't allow them in. I mean, it sounds to me like you're fully agreeing with President Trump on this when everybody else disagreed with him. And if you're saying that you wish that travel restriction had been more extreme, okay, fine. I mean, you apparently had the foresight back then, but when nobody else did.
Okay. Okay. Please get this book to number 1, just because I want you to go back on. So I have been present and known quite a few people who've been there for Bill Maher's tapings. And a lot of it, like there's a crowd animator at most late night shows. And then at Bill Maher, it's like, you better clap or you are out of here.
It's a threat.
And he uses that power of the audience. We've never seen Bill Maher perform this poorly. He usually portrays himself as a genius. Let me ask you, do you think that it helped you that you were both on equal footing as opposed to being in his studio with his audience? Did that embolden you?
Equal footing is always good. I've never been in his studio with his audience, so I've got nothing to compare it with. The conversation could have gone totally differently if it was about a different topic. Also, the reality is on this particular topic, we have all the evidence on our side,
right? And
they don't. So they're at a total disadvantage. I do think Bill Maher's a smart guy. I do, and I do have some respect for him. He does a lot of things that, like, I really don't like either. We probably have the same opinions, but he.
No, I don't have much respect for him. I do think he's smart, but I don't have much respect for him. So I want to make sure that you're not tarred and feathered because of my lack of respect. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I try to give everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people the most benefit of the doubt that I can.
Yeah.
He takes. I appreciate anybody who goes after their own progressive left wing.
That's true.
Left wingers to the extent that he does, and I told him on the show, and I meant it. I do see him as a liberal, not a leftist, and I think there's a difference. I think he's wrong on almost everything he says.
Yeah.
But at least he's willing to debate it and bring somebody like me on.
Sure.
And present his facts the best way he can, and allow me to present mine. So.
Yes.
I respect that.
Being said, I think that you have a skewed view because, right, this was run in its entirety. And again, often what happens in his studio is he cuts the parts that he doesn't like. That's the problem. We've actually only ever edited in the history of the show 2 interviews, and one was by request, and the other one was because the guy was on drugs and didn't remember it, and we thought, well, it wouldn't be fair to run this. Outside of that, we never change it. We let the cards fall where they may. It was Artie Lang. That's no secret, and I love Artie Lang, and I didn't want him to get in trouble. This was before, he's sober now, so that's a good thing. We can celebrate it. Yeah. But so your experience is more of an even debate. That doesn't happen in a studio. That being said, my primary gripe with him is that he's painfully unfunny, and I don't have that with like Jon Stewart, even Stephen Colbert. Bill Maher's punchline is right, and someone with an applause sign. And so when you take that away from the equation, I mean, you were daddy.
Yeah. Again, I don't know what it's like to have the audience there. I don't know that it would have changed all that much. It kind of depends on your personality. To an extent, I'm a bit emboldened by even more adversaries.
Right.
And they're not all that distracting to me. You put a lot of effort and preparation into any interview. You kind of know what the topics are going to be. again, they're fair. Like they say, hey, we're going to talk about this stuff. We're not going to tell you what our questions are. We're not going to tell you what angle we're coming at it from.
Yeah.
We're going to generally tell you what we're talking about. So, even if they hadn't told me that, of course I know it's going to be about Trump having blood on his hands, right? Like, of course I know that, because that's what everybody's talking about all the time during that week. Notice it stopped. Notice that line, that narrative hasn't bubbled up a whole lot recently. I think it was so thoroughly debunked, and the Washington Post tried to do a fact check on me. They did their best. There was no fact checking in there, just quibbling, and then Guy Benson, our friend, wrote a counter piece to that one.
Oh, he's not my friend. I hate him. But Guy Benson slept on my couch actually. In this is before. What's funny is, I swear this is a true story. Guy Benson. He will confirm this. Very nice guy. I've always had good. I used to do his show all the time. I was living with the booker for Red Eye in Chelsea, New York, I was the only straight man for 4 straight blocks. At this point, Guy Benson wasn't out of the closet. And so we were on a Fox panel together, and I was like, well, you don't have to pay money for a hotel. Yeah, we can stay on the couch. He's like, oh, thank you. I'm pretry sure that at the time, he probably thought I was gay. Oh. Gay roommate in Chelsea. Right. And then afterwards, he came out of the closet. I was like, oh, yeah. All right, cool.
Well, how do you feel about him not giving you a pass? He didn't even try.
Yeah, I know. I felt a little insulted. I was like, you're sleeping on my couch? My door didn't have a lock. So, no, I love Guy Benson. And if I were you, Mr. Crenshaw, do you prefer Representative Crenshaw, Mr. Crenshaw, Danny?
Dan. Definitely not Danny. Let's go with Dan.
Oh, okay. Dan, something I do appreciate about you that you just said, all kidding aside, is you said, you prepare for the interviews. There are some people in the conservative movement, and frankly, I'm smart enough, but I always over-prepare. So, for example, if we do a Change My Mind or something like that, which Quarter Black, Garrett, Audio Wade, Gerald, it can be 4 or 5 hours of anyone who comes up. I will spend each hour of Change My Mind averages out to about 10 hours of prep. And there are a lot of people who take pride in saying, I don't prepare. I'm just that good. And I think that you're obviously very smart. You're a sharp guy. But you telling people that you take it seriously and prepare, that's not always the most popular marketing angle. And does it frustrate you when you see other people who prepare thoroughly, but they act like it comes naturally?
I haven't really thought about that. I don't really believe anybody that's just. Honestly, if they are genuine, all I see is the outcome, right? So if you're genuinely good at debate and you've anticipated counter arguments, and you've got a list of facts, then clearly you've prepared. Now, maybe you memorized it faster than somebody else did. Maybe it only took you 30 minutes.
Right.
Maybe you do this so often that really you didn't prepare.
Right.
There's plenty of heated debates that I go into that I honestly don't prepare for, but that doesn't mean I haven't been preparing for years.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You're living in preparation.
Yeah. Right. So I don't know. I haven't really thought about that too much.
No, I think it's valuable. I think young people who look up to you, and there are a lot of people who look up to you, sometimes people think like, oh, my hero or someone I admire. And I'm not saying you're my hero. I like you, but let's pull back the reins a little bit. But for some people, that may be the case, and it's good for them to see like, oh, he takes this serious. He prepares. He understands that he can be caught flat-footed. That makes it more accessible, which is what I want to see. Yeah, I think you're pretty.
Right. And chapter 2 is called "Who is Your Hero?" and it's a question, and you would answer it, Dan Crenshaw, and
and Bill Maher would answer, well, he would scratch out hero and write Daddy. Yeah. I'm sorry. No. Listen, here's the thing. You have to understand. I never, and my lawyer, half-Asian lawyer Bill Richmond, has a question for you. But I never made it past the screener with Bill Maher. Yeah. I spoke on the phone with the screener, and they asked me. I remember this was when the Russia thing was going on. And I said, well, what do you want to talk about? I said, well, I don't know. What do you want to talk about? And they said, well, you have to. I said, well, I just saw Beauty and the Beast last night, and I thought it was pretty funny that in colonial France they had black royalty and powdered wig and whiteface. Like if we're talking about hashtag Oscars so white, can't you chalk this up as a win? And she goes, so you want to come on a political show and talk about Beauty and the Beast? I said, no, I just told you what pissed me off yesterday. I saw the film. What do you want to talk about? And she goes, Russia. I said, okay, well, listen, what do you got aside from conjecture? And she said, well, call you back. Click. So apparently I'm not as smart as the folks who make it on the show. I can't hold a candle to the SE Cups and Lorenz of the world.
I would love to see you and Bill hang out. I think it'd be hilarious. So So yeah, I do think preparation is important. I do talk about that in my book quite a bit. In a serious way, I did bring up that chapter called "Who is Your Hero?" because you have to be, when you look up to people, it shouldn't be a person, because somebody will always disappoint you.
Right.
But you should look up to attributes, and you should, my debate. The guy that I look up to as a debater who's always anticipating the arguments and knows how to frame the argument.
Gallagher.
You can probably guess. Ben Shapiro.
Okay. He's pretty good.
Fine.
Yeah, I mean, he's very good at, and framing the argument's incredibly important.
Yeah.
The way I framed the argument for Bill's show was this: like, it's a simple question. Are you trying to make Trump look bad, or are you trying to get to the truth?
Right.
Because there's two different answers there.
Yes.
And I think the best way to debate the left oftentimes is to expose what they're doing in that moment. And so here's an example, right? Like lately we've been debating whose fault it was that the small business funding got delayed. Mm-hmm. Well, the Democrats will claim that they're on a moral high ground because all they wanted to do was add more money to it, right? And so they fought for that, and
right.
They're fighters for the American people, and they're fighters for our hospitals and the testing. But here's the thing: they're fighting for money that doesn't need to be replenished.
Right.
We're fighting, the funding that we've already allocated is not even close to being spent yet. Should have spent the small business. We should have replenished the small business funding over a week ago,
right. And
then figured out, how to spend the rest of the money. But here's how to frame that argument and expose what they're doing. They're attaching the size of their heart to dollar signs.
Right.
So just say that, right? Like that's
important. They're attaching the size of their heart to dollar signs from somebody else's pocket. It's not their dollars.
Exactly.
That's something that people often miss. And I will say, listen, I don't consider myself a skilled debater at all, but the one thing that I've always talked about, and this was a book that I pitched, funny enough, to conservative publishers back when I was at Fox News. It became Change My Mind. And they said, this isn't going to work. The Obama Blueprint was a big book. Like, if you have a doomsday Obama thing, that'll sell. But this won't work to trying to convince people to your way of thinking. And I always said, listen, this was before social justice warrior was a term. This is before snowflake was a term. So I referred to them as sort of, I referred to them as modern leftist progressives and the American idiots, meaning that sort of Green Day used that against conservatives. And I meant American idiots, people who are liberal by default, people who watch TV, who tune into CNN, who every radio show they listen to, every band they like tells them to be left wing. And I said there are two different approaches. You need to change the mind of these people, these sort of ignorant Americans who've taken this position by default. And that's where you take an approach, use the Socratic method, have them walk through their own arguments. That's usually most productive. Yeah. Someone like a Bill Maher or Nancy Pelosi, like you're saying, what you have to do is highlight what they're saying, make an example of them so that then you can convince the people who have taken the position by default. And identifying the two different kinds of people with whom you're speaking is, I think, a very important skill set. And I think you handle it very well with Bill Maher.
That's a great point. Because you're not going to convince Bill on his show to see it your way. That's not the purpose of the show. The purpose is to have a debate for an audience and convince other people that way. What you do with Change Your Mind is really great, and I love that you put a lot of preparation into it. You have to, because you have to anticipate every angle that somebody's going to come from, and every personal experience that they might bring up. And I think you do a good job of anticipating that. It also helps when you're trying to support an argument that, frankly, you've got a lot of evidence on your side for.
And I think it's important to have those, because I guarantee you that if Bill Maher and I were to sit down and talk, or for example, when we've had mayors in the show, and Naomi Wolf, it's more hostile in the sense that when someone is coming on saying I'm wrong, well, listen, I'm going to match the intensity. So it's important for me, for people to see me speaking in a very civil, respectful way and trying to convince people, bring them to my way of thinking so they understand the difference between that and handling what is effectively a character assault. Because I'm not always going to be meek. My half-Asian lawyer, did you have a question there?
I did, yeah. Representative, thanks so much for being on the show. One of the questions I have right now is we know that there's a lot of different counties and states that are opening, taking some measured approaches to try and get people back to work, allow the economy to partially restart. Are there any particular thoughts you have about those counties, and is there any part about your book Fortitude that you think speaks to what's going on right now and the kind of debates we're having over the controversial topic of letting some people safely go back to work?
Yes, definitely. So what I talk about a lot in the book, it's a prevalent theme throughout, which is personal responsibility, owning your own destiny. And I make a very strong argument against this idea of victimhood culture, where you actually remove agency from people's ability or from people and remove their ability to control their own lives. When you tell somebody you're a victim, that's effectively what you're doing. You're disempowering them. This is pretty applicable to how we open up our society. We have to trust the American people to make the right decisions, to live with this sense of duty. Another thing I talk about in the book is the fact that the government's job is to protect your rights, but there is an exchange there, an exchange of citizenship, an exchange to live responsibly and to live dutifully and morally. We don't talk about that enough. We don't talk about the idea of citizenship and doing the right thing. And that is more important than ever as we reopen the economy. You have to trust people. And I'm going against our county judge here in Harris County because she gave a directive, all too sensible, that suggests that we wear masks in public. That's fine. But then added a $1,000 fine if you don't do it.
Right.
I said, no, that's not fine.
Right.
And it's just totally unnecessary. Allow Americans to do the right thing. We were already socially distancing before it was a directive from the top down. And we can do this too. Let businesses figure it out. Okay. Let businesses figure out how to restructure their office space or their restaurant space so that we can get back to normalcy. There is no choice but to return to some sense of new normal. There's no choice.
Right.
And this false dichotomy between staying home forever and letting people die, that's a false choice. It's not true, never has been. Only political opportunists are making it sound like that, and it disgusts me. But to get back to that new normal, we have to act like good Americans. And I'll say this last thing. One, talking about the Harvards that took the money but returned it, and the Shake Shacks that took the money but returned it. If you're a business out there whose revenue hasn't really changed, shame on you for taking the small business loans that we're giving out. It's very hard from a policy perspective to put proper limits on those. It's extremely difficult because as soon as you do, you start making it even harder for the smaller businesses.
But then the problem also, I think we also understand that the problem becomes, like John Stossel has talked about this. He had some kind of a federal grant subsidy where his home built on stilts effectively in the ocean washed away like 2 times. He goes, I know that some people say I'm a hypocrite for taking the state funding, but I'd be an idiot not to. And there is a problem where if small businesses are still even operating on an honest profit margin, well, if they don't take the loans that are available, they're going to be competing with bigger businesses that are, and they'll fall further behind.
And totally get it, but un-American, and they should be ashamed of themselves. Period.
Yeah.
Full stop. So when I got out of the military, I read about this in my book too. When I got out of the military, and this feeds into the victimhood culture, and there's a reason why. When I got out of the military, I was eligible for Social Security disability insurance. I was actually, they actually promoted it in the military. Like, hey, not only are you getting medically retired because you're injured or something's wrong with you, but
what happened?
As soon as you get out,
Sorry. I'm such a jerk. I apologize.
Do you though?
No. That's going to be a highlight. Okay, sorry, but continue. Yeah, they were promoting Social Security. I know this. I know this.
Yeah, and so it blew my mind. This was after I got my eye blown out. And so the other thing about that
make him feel bad
was in case you were wondering what happened, but in that classroom full of other Navy sailors, I was honestly wondering what had happened. Every single person in there looked fine from the outside, at least. Right. Nobody had been in combat. These were not a bunch of fellow special operators by any means. This was not Army Infantry or Marine Corps. None of that. Everybody was getting medically retired for some reason. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of reasons you can get medically retired or just choose to go through the medical retirement process.
Yeah.
And the government will take care of you afterwards. I believe generously. Some might disagree with me. I believe it's very generous.
Yeah.
But to also get Social Security disability insurance, which most Americans believe is for Americans that are so disabled they can't work.
Right.
So they need SSDI. I could have gotten up to $2,000 extra a month, especially after I got out and I wasn't full-time working. Remember, I went back to school. Mm-hmm. I didn't take it. I refused to apply for that. I could have, and by economic sense and by the straight economic sense that you're describing and that a lot of businesses are using to justify taking money that they don't need, I could have taken that. Right. But I refused because that's not who I want to be. And this goes into the conversation about who your heroes are and what we should applaud in America.
Yeah, I was more so just pointing out the issue that in this case it's appropriate because the government stepped in and said we're going to effectively put you out of business, right? They said don't be a patron of this business anymore. Don't support
totally.
them. So this is different from stimulus. Yeah, but my point is that this is what ends up happening when the government, let's say more so, it would be more appropriate with the stimulus under the Obama era presidency, where you're effectively picking winners and losers. Then everyone says like, well, if I have to compete, it becomes like the steroid argument, and it's not a good thing. That's why we just should have government involved as little as possible. Final question. I know you have to go. Regarding your book, Fortitude, which is available everywhere books are sold, if you can find a bookstore anymore, but certainly digitally on Amazon. You talk about in the book like how to find strength and fortitude, and obviously it's reminiscent of Jocko quite a bit, who's been on the show, and I think it's a message that's very much needed. How would you respond to this claim that's going out quite a bit that Generation Z believe they've lived their entire lives in crisis, and so they've lost hope? I mean, this is front page at a lot of different news outlets, as though they've had it worse than any generation before them, and then when polled, they are more defeated and hopeless. And that mindset, to me, is frankly very scary as they enter the workforce.
Yeah, the best reference for this phenomenon with Gen Z is Jonathan Haidt's book, The Coddling of the American Mind. I've referenced that book quite a bit in my book. My book is a set of solutions to the problem. I'm not diagnosing the problem itself. I reference good authors that have done so. And Coddling of the American Mind, I think, is the premier place to look if you're looking for why Gen Z is that way. And there's a lot of reasons. College campuses basically reinforcing these bad ideas that your feelings actually matter. I mean, they matter, but like the feelings that make you right. Like over reason and over logic. And the coddling that has occurred both on campuses and in the household. There's good data on this to show that Gen Z was only allowed to leave the house to go to a friend's house like much later in life than say even millennials or Gen Xers.
And really quickly, if I can say too, what's really scary though is they have a legitimate gripe that they're entering a more competitive workforce than previous generations. Like that is something that now it is hyper specialized. So you have a generation, and I would say more so millennials than Generation Z. It seems like they might actually be a little bit better, some of the stats that we're seeing, but they are being coddled growing up and then being thrust into a hyper competitive exponentially evolving workplace, and that seems like a recipe for disaster because there is validity to them going like, I don't know how I'm going to do this.
Yeah, no, and there is validity, just like when the millennials have complaints about basically graduating into a financial crisis. I get it. There's some validity to these issues. There's some validity to the complaints that housing is more expensive, healthcare is more expensive, and college is more expensive relative to past generations. It is. Okay, everything else, though, is much better. Does it cancel each other out? I'm not so sure. Can you move to a place where housing is cheaper? Yeah, you can. Millennials like to live in places where housing is more expensive. Also, better jobs are there. So, I get it. There are pressures that we do have to, I think, acknowledge. And Gen Z, I think we have to acknowledge, too, that, yes, they are starting their early careers right now in the midst of this crisis. I do think we bounce back from this rather quickly, and so that would be my message of hope to them.
Yeah, I mean, message of hope is imagine France surrendering and going like, pretty much all of Europe is lost except for one guy, Churchill, putting up a fight, and we have a choice between communism or fascism. I think that probably would be a little bit scarier than according to Cuomo, the highest estimate now is a 0.5% death rate. Every life lost matters, but it's not the depths of despair and hopelessness for every Generation Z American. Okay, the book is Fortitude. Mr. Representative Dan Crenshaw, I appreciate you being here, brother. Stay well, and let us know next time you're on Bill Maher's show.
I will. Thanks for having me, Stephen.
Thank you.
Good to be with you.
Be well. All right, hang up on him. He's so smug.